Hi friends, this is Terry Squires with today's Nashville, This is Faith. I sat down with Grayson Russell, Talladega Nights, trilogy of the Wimpy Kid, listened to some of his songs, and he has a message for you. You won't want to miss his episode. Wipe away your tears. Jesus is standing in front of you, calling your name. Do you ever think you are no good? From the Diary of the Wimpy Kid trilogy to Talladega Nights to Greyhound to Nashville, actor Grayson Russell has captivated audiences nationwide with his unique blend of country and southern rock. His song, Turned Out Good, has a message for those who think they've been through too much to be any good. This is his story. This is today's Nashville. This is Faith. Grayson, I am so excited to sit down with you. Thank you for being on today's Nashville.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
You are busy.
I try to be.
And you're what, 26?
26, yes ma'am.
You've been on film, television series,
Yes ma'am.
country music, and praising the Lord in church.
Yes ma'am. All the above.
Let's go back from the early beginning. When did you start acting?
Okay, so I started acting doing local car dealership commercials when I was 6. And then I had done that for, I guess, about a year. And somebody came in my mom's office and said, hey, there's this Will Ferrell thing in the newspaper. I think you should take Grayson to it. The only reason we went was because Dad went fishing and me and Mom were bored. That was it. I couldn't read, hadn't started the 2nd grade yet. And we...
Well, did you like to act then, or?
I liked it fine. I mean, I didn't, it was just, I get to go and dress up and say whatever they tell me to.
And your mom thought
Mom
you'd be perfect.
Mom would get me a Game Boy game if I did it. I was like, okay. It wasn't something that my folks pushed me to do. She had gone to school with the guy who owned the car dealership. And they're just like, well, would Grayson want to come and be in a commercial? And so I did. And then the Talladega Nights audition came around. It was in the newspaper. And really, the only reason we went to it was because we were bored. Dad had a tournament. He was going to go fish, and me and Mom had nothing else to do.
Talladega Nights.
And that was Talladega Nights. That was my first one. And so I went, auditioned. They called me back a couple weeks later, auditioned again. And they said, cool, report to Charlotte, North Carolina for 2 months. And I worked 55 days on that shoot. Got saved doing Talladega Nights.
Well, you know, I read that you had a really hard time with that movie at the beginning.
I did.
Because you didn't want to what?
I didn't want to cuss. I didn't want to use any kind of language. And for us, it was wild because we knew that nobody gets this opportunity. My folks didn't think it was going to be a real movie. It was just something to go to do on a Saturday. So this massive film lens in our laps, we know, okay, Lord, this has got to be from you, because it's certainly anything we were trying to do. But I had a lot of language, and I wasn't comfortable with that. Growing up in church my whole life, so with both my parents. And I got saved like the first weekend into like rehearsals or something like that.
Well, tell me about that real quick, and we'll go back.
Yeah. We were at Central Church of God in Charlotte. Pastor Loran Livingston's still the pastor there. And it was one of those Sunday mornings where like the whole family gets in a fight in the car, like on the way. And so like we come in late, we're rolling in on 2 wheels. This is 2005. We don't make it in time to get into like the main sanctuary, but they've got an overflow building with like a projector screen, which was new. I guess like that was before people had projectors. That was back when you actually like had to know the lyrics to everything, and it wasn't up on, the back wall. And it was a message out of Revelation. And I remember Loran saying, hey, we all come up and, if you feel led, come on up. And I sure did. I remember kind of getting out of it was a tan colored pew. There were chairs, and I remember, white knuckling a little bit and moving around and walking down there. And I remember the lady who was there to kind of lead me to the Lord asked if I could read because she had her Bible there, and she was like, "Could you read?" And I was like, "A little bit." And she was like, "Well, you get the gist of it." She, explained it to me, even though I had grown up in church my whole life, and got saved. And then that next week,
what'd your parents think?
Oh, they had no idea. I mean, they were over the moon about it. I don't know if it was something that any of us really expected would happen then.
You get saved, then you have to start swearing.
Yeah, then I have to start swearing. And so we hadn't really started, if I remember right, we hadn't really started principal photography. We had been doing rehearsals because me and Houston, who played my brother, had never done a film before. So we were just kind of figuring out how to do it, and they were walking us through the paces. And I remember going up to Adam McKay, who had directed Anchorman and everything that Will had done up that point. I believe he had written for Saturday Night Live. And I said, "Hey, do I really have to say all these words?" And I had woke him up from a nap, so I guess my timing was perfect. And he got up and he said, "You never have to say anything you're not comfortable with." And from that moment on, any remotely sideways verb, whatever, was given to Houston, who played my brother. He was 13 playing 10, couldn't cuss enough. But anytime, most of the lines that we had were all wild, and very little of it was actually scripted. So my big, I'm all jacked up on Mountain Dew, coming at you like a spider monkey, all that was just them just telling me to say stuff. But if at any point they said something that was a little sideways, the whole shoot would shut down. There would practically be a little line form to come up to apologize to me and my mother for putting me in a position that I wasn't comfortable with. And that, to this day, was the most professionally protective set I've ever been on. And had that gone sideways, I wouldn't have acted again. And I don't think anybody really expected me to. But here we are with 11 other films later and a couple of TV shows. The last film got nominated for an Oscar. It turned out all right. And it's, I'm really blessed that it's, an occupation that's a piece of my life.
Yeah, you're in music and acting.
Music and acting, yes, ma'am.
So what happened when you finished that film? Well, first, what was it like to work with Will Ferrell?
Will was precious. He would turn it on and turn it off. And he was awfully kind to me. He worked 56 days and I worked 55. So we were there the whole time together. Yes, ma'am.
Okay, after you finished that, what series did you go into?
It was 2 years of nothing. I auditioned. Well, I guess at that point, it was almost a backhanded compliment. After Talladega Nights came out, I was offered every little bratty child role in Western culture, which I didn't want to be known for, because they were like, "Okay, well now I guess I'm an actor." So I turned down a lot of roles off of Talladega Nights, and it was another 2 years before I did anything else.
Did your parents give you that option to turn them down, or did they?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, it ultimately was my call whether it was something I was comfortable doing or not. Mom certainly was the gatekeeper, and she would read the scripts beforehand, and if it was something she thought I would, be willing to do or be comfortable with, then it would come down to me, and if I was okay with doing it, then we would do it. But it was 2 years before I did the next film. It was a movie called The Rainbow Tribe, and then it was another 2 years of nothing, and then I did Wimpy Kid movies, and then we were off to the races for the next 5 or 6 films, boom, 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 for the next few years of my life.
What was that like?
Amazing. I'm still so incredibly close to a great portion of the cast, which isn't particularly common with film. You're around them for a couple months, and everybody goes their separate ways. But I've produced 2 singles for the lead. Zach Gordon, who's the lead in Wimpy Kid, and me and Rob, who played Rowley in that, have been incredibly close. They're some of my best friends, which is rare, and I'm really thankful for them and for everything that whole franchise has, brought to my life, because it was every bit as big as Talladega Nights was, and we got to, have that whole role again.
The Lord has given a passion on your heart, not only in acting, but your music, and you have a message for somebody or others that feel like they're no good.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about that when we come back.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Grayson, after the Diary of the Wimpy Kid, the trilogy, where did God take you then?
It was a rough patch. It was a rough patch there for a minute, because I think hindsight 2020, by the grace of God, I was able to make it through the whole child acting phase relatively unscathed. You only really ever hear horror stories of, actors going through this, that, or the other,
Were you in LA at this time?
No, I was living in Alabama. So it worked out for me. But I believe the reason really for me was that my work was just inconsistent enough. I wasn't working near as much as I wanted to be, because once you start, it's like, okay, cool, this is a new thing. But like I said, Talladega Nights, 2 years of nothing. Rainbow Tribe, 2 years of nothing. And then I hit the Wimpy Kid movies. We did 3 of those. I did a few more films after that. But my issue was, once I started high school, I was 14, but I looked 17. And getting in the weeds with it a little bit, you want to look younger because all the older guys can work longer. And so I didn't work for 4 years just because I looked too old, but I was too young to work as long as I did.
How did that affect you as a
I
actor?
had to get okay with not ever working again, because I really thought I had to be reconciled to the fact that I might not ever do another film. Thankfully, though, that helped me pull, the bits of self-worth that I had that was tied up in film out of there. And I got to the point where, okay, if, most people in this field, if they get to hit it big, they get to hit it once. And when they do, they're Morgan Freeman's age doing Driving Miss Daisy. And all the people that have supported them up to this point, their parents, their grandparents, that have, raised this starving artist, aren't around to see them do it. And at that point, as a 14-year-old, I had hit a level with Talladega Nights and with 3 Wimpy Kid movies that my folks got to see me do that. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? If I never work again, I got my money's worth. And 3 years after that, I did a movie called Greyhound with Tom Hanks that got nominated for an Oscar. And I got to do it again. And we hit this relative level 3 times. And, my granddad was still around to see me do that.
What was it like to work with Tom Hanks?
Tom Hanks was precious. He was a big Talladega Nights fan, which blew me away. It was the hardest shoot he had done, hardest shoot I had done, which made me feel better. We spent 2 months in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The film takes place in the North Atlantic during World War II in February. But we were filming in April in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, dressed like it was February on the North Atlantic. So I had on 4 or 5 different layers of wool, everything, made for World War II. But it was 94 degrees in Baton Rouge. So it was an arduous process, but it was worth it. It's the shoot I'm the proudest of, because it was the hardest one to do. We worked 16s for the better part of those 2 months, which couldn't be any farther from Blue Ridge, the show that I'm on now, where we work 10s, 5 days a week, good to go. It's super lighthearted, and which really kind of opens up a little more room for you to be more creative, because you're not as stressed about the physical limitations of what you got going on. With Greyhound, there's not another job, because people ask me all the time, do you prefer singing, or do you prefer music over acting, or which one? And I always tell them, there's not another job that I can have where I can be dressed for World War II, get yelled at by Tom Hanks, get nominated for an Oscar, and put myself through school so my folks don't have to. There's not another occupation I can have where I get to do that. But I'm playing somebody else. I'm stepping into the shoes of Franklin Stagg's signalman second class on the starboard side of the USS Kidd. That's not my actual life. But when I do my music, I get to be me.
You get to be you.
And talk about the things that I've lived through, good, bad, indifferent, the things my family's lived through, like turned out good. Try to provide what wisdom I have figured out and go, hey, y'all, this sounds like a good idea, and it's absolutely not. So don't do this. And, that version is called Go Cry Somewhere Else.
But you're 26 years old,
yes,
and so much you've gone through already.
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about Blue Ridge.
Blue Ridge has been one of the biggest blessings, certainly of my adult life and career. It started out, season 1 is out now. It's on Peacock, so you can go watch it. It's Blue Ridge, the series. There's a movie, but the series is the one that I'm a part of. And so I played Dwayne Dixon, which is like the Festus kind of village idiot character, which I love. It's easy. It's easy for me to come in and play the village idiot. It started out, they wanted me to come in for 2 episodes. They added me into a 3rd, and now by the grace of God, I'm a series regular on a show that's on a top 10 network, which I never thought I would do. Growing up, I did film almost exclusively because I didn't want to move the family, off to some strange place for years at a time.
Are they still in Alabama?
They're still in Alabama. Everybody lives on the same road for the most part. But once I graduated high school, and certainly after college, I was far more open to like, okay, cool, I'm going to go live somewhere else and work in this episodic. And so we've been back and forth. We started filming season 2 in September, and we'll wrap up next week in April. So 8 episodes. I'm in every one of them, which is wild to go from. It's all the good Lord to go from. Hey, we just want you to come in for a couple episodes. To
tell me
here I am
about
and
the
everything.
series. What is it all?
So
about?
it follows the local sheriff, Justin Wise, played by Jonathan Sheck from That Thing You Do, who also worked with Hanks. It's cool how many mutual connections we all have. He's a retired Special Forces and is the sheriff of Blue Ridge. And it essentially is like a mountain justice cop drama family show where I usually cause a lot of problems and then inadvertently, sometimes I help fix them, sometimes I make it worse. And it just follows all the happenings that goes on in this, kind of backwoods corner of the world.
Tell me how you went from acting, because you get this question a lot, to your music.
So it's actually the other way around. I started traveling doing gospel with my folks when I was 5. They had sang Southern gospel and bounced around the better part of Alabama doing that on the weekends. Talladega Nights didn't happen until I was 7. By that point, I had started another band that was a Bee Gees cover band. So music was always a huge part of my life. When I was 2 years old, I wanted to be George Strait. My first memory on this planet is at the Opry, as a 2-year-old Old Crow Medicine Show was playing the door. I'd always wanted to have a band, be in a band. Once, I saw my folks do it. And then when film kicked off, that's always opened more doors for the music to kind of take place. And I just really started leaning into it over the past few years. Well, the past 8 years. That's how long I've had my Southern rock band now.
You have a new single coming out.
Yes, ma'am.
What's the title?
So I've got one that's out right now. It's called Go Cry Somewhere Else. I've got a new one coming out called Sing It Plain that is about how I went from music to acting, and acting kind of put some of the music on hold for a little while, and now we're leaning into that side of my life. And then Turned Out Good, the one you like, that'll come out for Father's Day. Yes, ma'am.
We're going to talk about Turned Out Good because,
Yes, ma'am.
again, a lot of people feel like they are not good enough.
Yes, ma'am.
And you have a message for them.
Absolutely.
And we're going to talk about it. You're going to sing about it when we come back. Grayson, tell me about Turned Out Good. What were you, did you write it?
Yes, ma'am. So it wasn't something I intended to write. I did a master's from seminary in counseling and was learning about how important the first couple years of life are as to who you turn out to be. And I was at home. I was with my dad cooking steaks. And I said, hey, thank you for letting me be. I was raised by my granddad and his older sisters when my folks would go to work. So I spent a lot of time with a bunch of old people. And I said, hey, Dad, thanks for letting me be raised by all these elderly people that had nothing better to do than to worship the ground I walked on instead of, like just a sophomore. Because I understand now like how important that was as to who I've become. And my dad locked up and he started crying. He said, the only reason you were raised that way is because I was abused by my babysitter as a child and your mama doesn't know and nobody knows. And I want to remember my childhood, but I don't. I think it was good, but I don't know. And sucked it up. And I had no idea what to do with that. And at this point, Dad was 52, 53. He had held that in since he was 8 years old. Hadn't told us so. And I was in Walmart and was pushing a buggy, and songwriting's weird. Most of the time I get the lyrics and the melody at the same time. And this line came into my head that's in the second chorus of the song. And I didn't really know what to do with this bit of information because it's like, well, this is a horrible story to tell. How do I redeem it? Because my dad turned out good. And the only other story that I could think of in my own life was when my grandfather, he passed away in September, when he was 3 years old, he lost his mom. She got melanoma from picking cotton, and she died in her 30s. When he was 7, he got rheumatic fever, and it paralyzed him from the waist down. And so he just kind of scooted around on his butt. And he hadn't walked, I think, in 6 or 8 months, and he was about to die. And his father, who was a belligerent alcoholic, was like, well, there's a church service going on the other side of the county. We'll take you if you want to go, but whatever you want to do, it's up to you, but it's kind of it. And they took him, and the whole family stands outside this church service arguing about who's going to take the kid in there, because none of them want to walk in there. None of them want anything to do with the good Lord. And finally, my great-granddad said, well, forget all y'all. I'm sure it was more colorful than that. I'll take him. And so he comes stumbling down the aisle, this drunk with his 7-year-old paralyzed child. And the evangelist said, hey, what's wrong with him? And he said he hadn't walked in 8 months. I said, okay. In the name of the Father and Son and the Holy Ghost, put him down and let him go. And my granddad took off running. No rehab, no atrophy, miraculous healing. Boom. Whole family converts, builds the church I was raised in. Which is why something as simple as cussing in a movie was such a big deal. Because we'd seen the other side of, you have what it's like to be holy and separate, and what this in the world and not of it line is, and that's, in this case, is crossing it. You want me to play it for you?
Yes, play a little bit for me.
I'll do it. It's called Turned Out Good. Hope y'all like it. Oh, he was blue collar for most of his life, was the youngest of 6 with 2 kids and a wife, and you'd never know it if he walked in the room. He'd work nights to bring home the bacon, and he only had a 10th grade education, but he's probably the smartest man I ever knew. They used to make t-shirts and they'd stick me in a box. He'd sing Big Bad John, walk me through the shop, and he always made me feel 10 feet tall. But sometimes I'd look into his eyes and they'd seem old. And just by looking, you'd never know that his mama died when he was 3, got cancer picking cotton, fell down in the weeds, and he wasn't tall enough to see what was going on. At 7, he got paralyzed from the waist down, 'cause the fever took his legs so he'd slide on the ground. But they took him to that tent revival and they all watched him run. So you can't tell me that there ain't a father and there ain't a son. 'Cause he turned out good. Oh, he's worn a tie for most of my life, built a house with his hands for his kid and his wife, and I think he'd rather die than retire. I used to hate Saturdays 'cause he'd make me go fishing. At nights he'd study that Sunday school lesson, and he'd bring you to tears singing with that choir. But sometimes I'd look into his eyes and they'd seem old. And just by looking, you'd never know that when his mama left his daddy, turned on to liquor, and that kid got abused by his babysitter, and now he can't remember most of his childhood. But he grew up and married an Alabama queen. Now his kid's in the movies and he's chasing his dreams. And my daddy made a life for all of us the way that he should. So you can't tell me that you've been through too much to be any good. 'Cause he turned out good. That used to be paralyzed child, raised that Alabama queen, taught my daddy about Jesus, and they taught it to me, and that's the only reason I'm able to be who I am. So you can't tell me that there ain't a father and there ain't a son, and you can't tell me that you've been through too much to be any good. Cause they turned out good.
Grayson.
There you go.
Powerful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
And it's not out yet.
No, it's not out yet. It comes out Father's Day. And the really solid thing about that song is I'm run a Southern rock band. You know, we're playing all over the place, whether it's Broadway at Nashville or we're opening for Lauren Daigle for like 40,000 people in June, maybe something like that, June, July. But we're able to do our whole spiel. I can play that song and say whether you lost your mom as a child, you're terminally ill, you were beaten and abused by the only people who were ever supposed to love you. It can end with you because the only common denominator in either of these men turning out good is Jesus Christ. That's it. And here's your evidence. And I'm able to bring my dad out, who sings circles around me. And we'll do either I Can Only Imagine, which is the first song I ever learned to sing, or Can't Even Walk. Can't even walk without you holding my hand from like the 70s or 80s. And then we'll go into Freebird or whatever it is. We'll go right back to our show. But by the time it's over with, there will be a longer line of grown, burly, 50-something-year-old men that are bawling their eyes out that have come to meet my father and go, how in the world did your marriage survive? Did your kid turn out all right? There'll be a bigger line to meet my dad as there have ever been Talladega Nights or Wimpy Kid or Greyhound fans. And it's able to redeem, you know, all my father's, you know, the things that have plagued my father for his whole life. And we're able to do that. We've done it on Broadway at PBR downtown on 2nd Avenue for CMA Fest. No different than we can do that in a church. That's how I like my ministry to go, because it's on people that are, you know, might not be so jaded as church folks, because it's easy to be after a while. And I love getting to do it. And that's what I want to do the rest of my life. So,
Grayson,
yes,
powerful. God is going to
Thank you.
use you. He is using you in a mighty way. And I just pray blessings on you and the hearts that you're touching.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being here
I'll
today.
take all I get. Take all the wisdom y'all feel like praying for, because Lord knows I need it. Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
My friend, are you going through something where you think you are just no good, that God could never use you? You're wrong. He's standing right in front of you. Lay your sins down at the cross. Let Him be Lord of your life. It's that easy. Do it today. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.